Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, January 30th, 2023. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Zelensky says that Ukraine needs more weapons faster. So Zelensky said on Sunday that Ukraine needs to secure the supply of new weapons from its Western backers and that the arms deliveries need to speed up. He said in his nightly address on Sunday, quote, "It is very important to maintain the dynamics of defense support from our partners. The speed of supply has been and will be one of the key factors in this war." End quote. He said that Russia seeks to exhaust Ukrainian forces, and for that reason, Ukraine must, quote, "speed up the events, speed up the supply and opening of new necessary weaponry options for Ukraine," end quote. So, the same day that President Biden announced last week that the U.S. would be providing Ukraine with M1 Abrams tanks, Zelensky was demanding more. Mikhailo Podolyak, who is an advisor to Zelensky, he said on Saturday that Ukraine is in fast track talks. That's how he put it, fast track talks with, these Western countries on the possibility of receiving fighter jets and long range missiles. Right now, the focus from the Ukrainian side seems to be on the fighter jets. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has rejected the idea that Ukraine would be receiving fighter jets basically from any Western country, is what he made it sound like. But Scholz, he previously ruled out sending heavy tanks to Ukraine and eventually caved under the pressure. And that was really what Biden sending the Abrams was all about. The Pentagon is saying that they're not really practical to give to Ukraine, but they're saying, yeah, we'll give them to you pretty much. So Germany started sending the Leopard tanks, and then other countries that have them will start sending them as well. So if Schultz says, they're not going to do something, I don't think we should really take his word for it. I mean, his government initially said they weren't going to send any weapons to Ukraine, and look how that turned out. So Ukraine has its eye on US-made F-16s and French-made Rafale or Mirage fighter jets. While Kiev has yet to receive any Western-made fighter jets or any we haven't seen any public pledge that they're going to receive anything like this. They're already preparing for receiving them by working to improve their airfields so that advanced aircraft can operate in the country. So Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Colonel Yuri Ignat said, quote, "We have to prepare the airfield infrastructure so that pilots could land safely on the airstrips. The works are in progress in different regions of Ukraine with the support of the Ministry of Infrastructure, the Ministry of Defense, and other government agencies to support us in the creation of this airfield network," end quote. So the work's already happening, so they seem pretty confident that they're going to get what they want. And Politico reported on Saturday that the idea of sending Ukraine F-16s is gaining momentum among some officials in the Pentagon. The provision of Western fighter jets, of course, is going to be a major escalation, and Moscow is going to view it as a huge provocation. So, since the US and Germany announced that they would be sending tanks, we've been seeing all these warnings from Russian officials about escalating the war, about how they're viewing this as a greater increase in the direct involvement of the US and NATO in this war. One official said it could lead to a full-blown war in Europe. This is an article from Will Porter at the Libertarian Institute that I had in here that we ran over the weekend. This was from Russia's deputy envoy to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, basically saying that the leaders of NATO and the U.S. have come close to a red line, and that their deliberate actions to escalate the military confrontation in Ukraine is a path to a full-blown military conflict in Europe. So another warning that the U.S. and NATO will likely ignore. All right, so the next article here, a NATO official says that the alliance is ready for a direct confrontation with Russia. So this is Admiral Rob Bauer. He is the head of NATO's military committee. He said that NATO is ready for a direct confrontation with Russia, citing the alliance's recent efforts to boost its presence in Eastern Europe. So last year, NATO placed new battle groups in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. So it's a few thousand NATO troops in each one of these countries. This is on top of the battle groups that they've had deployed in Poland and the Baltic states. That's Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. They've had them employed there, deployed there for a few years now. And the U.S., of course, also deployed its own troops to Eastern Europe, outside of those NATO deployments, sending tens of thousands more troops over there, including many that are stationed near the Ukrainian border in Poland and Romania. So this NATO guy, this NATO official is saying, yeah, we're ready, if it comes to it, for a direct clash with Russia in Europe. So Bauer is a Dutch naval officer. He also said that NATO countries should discuss shifting to a war economy where civilian factories start producing military goods, similar to what the United States did during World War II. In fact, that's what he compared it to. So he said that the discussion, they have to start talking about what he called a war economy in peacetime, which sounds a little contradictory. And the U.S. is taking measures to ramp up arms production, pretty drastic measures, but not as drastic as what he's suggesting, but a few things that have been done. The Pentagon is planning to increase artillery ammunition production by 500% over the next 2 years to keep up with the demand to send the artillery to Ukraine. And the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act that granted the Pentagon wartime purchasing powers to speed up arms deals, basically bypassing certain red tape so they could buy stuff quicker. And again, it's not as drastic as what Bauer is suggesting. And I think seeing a NATO official suggesting that a wartime economy, get car factories to start making weapons. I mean, that really shows, I think, how, again, there's just no end in sight. They expect this to really drag on. All right, the next one here. Russia accuses Ukraine of killing 14 in a hospital strike using U.S. provided HIMARS. So on Saturday, Russia accused Ukrainian forces of killing 14 people and injuring 25 in a strike on a hospital in the eastern Luhansk Oblast using U.S. provided HIMARS rocket systems. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed that the strike took place in the town of Novoadar and called it a deliberate attack on civilians. The Russian Defense Ministry said, quote, "A deliberate missile strike against a known functioning civilian medical facility is without a doubt a serious war crime by the Kiev regime," end quote. So according to Reuters, Ukraine has not responded to the allegations, and I did a lot of searches and I couldn't find Ukraine addressing this allegation from Russia. And the Russian account also hasn't been verified. We always see pretty conflicting claims from each side, but it's interesting that Ukraine hasn't responded. And I didn't see a response from the U.S. or any Western countries. And the Russian Foreign Ministry said Sunday that the lack of a response from Ukraine's Western backers shows their direct involvement in the war. The Russian Foreign Ministry said, quote, "The lack of reaction from the United States and other NATO countries to this yet another monstrous trampling of international humanitarian law by Kiev once again confirms their direct involvement in the conflict," end quote. So Dmitry Polyansky, he's Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the UN. He said that the U.S. was directly complicit in the alleged strike. He said, "As we know from Ukrainian officials, the targets of the HIMARS are agreed to by Washington." Back in August 2022, a Ukrainian official said that Kiev had to consult with U.S. officials before launching HIMARS strikes and that the U.S. has veto power over the attacks. So that's what he's, discussing here. And he said that because of this, it makes the U.S. directly complicit. Now, again, this isn't confirmed. We don't know if this strike. They put some pictures out of a hospital that looks like it was hit, but the details aren't confirmed. And even the fact that they're saying they use the HIMARS system isn't confirmed. But HIMARS is a precision guided missile, so that's why they're saying, I guess, that it was deliberate. So again, I mean, I think it's interesting that we haven't seen a response from Ukraine or the U.S. And Polyansky, he said U.S. taxpayers should be aware of how their money is used. And I mean, that's the reason why we would highlight a claim like this from Russia, because I think the fact that they're saying it was done with U.S. provided weapons, there should be some kind of answer, some kind of response from Ukraine or from the U.S. All right. So the next article here, Israel was behind an attack on an Iranian military facility, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. So over the weekend, on Saturday night, there was all this stuff, these reports about attacks inside Iran. Um, some reports suggested they were all over the country, but it looks like it was just one, at least confirmed. It's tough to really know what happened. I know there was a fire at some other facility in there, but there was also an earthquake in Iran that might have caused some damage to some places. It looks like to me there was just one attack, really, uh, launched by Israel on an Iranian military facility in the city of Isfahan. So, Iranian authorities said that 3 small quadcopter drones targeted a munitions factory in this city and that its air defenses shot down one drone. They intercepted the other 2, but they said they exploded above the building, causing minor damage but no casualties. The Wall Street Journal report cited unnamed U.S. officials and people familiar with the operation who said the attack came as the U.S. and Israel were looking for new ways to contain Tehran's military ambitions. So they're kind of hinting at potential U.S. involvement. And these attacks happen from time to time. Israel has a long history of covert operations inside Iran, and in recent years, they've launched attacks using these small quadcopter drones, which so the report said that the attack took place next to a facility owned by the Iran Space Research Center, which has been sanctioned by the U.S. for allegedly being involved in Iran's ballistic missiles program. Iran has yet to attribute blame for the incident, but again, Israel has a long history of launching similar covert attacks using these small quadcopter drones. And I've seen this before where Iran it takes them a couple days to blame Israel. And usually, it's usually Israel's always suspected, again, because they have a history. It's rare that they take credit for these attacks, but there's always these leaks to the media by U.S. or Israeli officials saying that Israel was behind it, but usually they wait a little longer to say so. This happened pretty quickly. So, I mean, it shows me that maybe they're a little more emboldened. But just some examples of these attacks. In May 2022, an Israeli drone attack targeted an Iranian military facility outside of Tehran, killing one engineer. And about 1 year earlier, in June 2021, an Iranian nuclear facility was hit in an Israeli drone attack, resulting in damage to cameras belonging to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. The report said that the incident on Saturday marks the first attack inside Iran under the new Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, although he has overseen plenty of covert operations inside Iran under previous governments that he led. The attack came as the U.S. and Israel are stepping up joint military coordination and just concluded their largest ever joint exercise, which was seen as a major provocation toward Iran, of course. The U.S. and Israel have been discussing ways to counter Iran and Tehran's growing military. That's a little redundant. I got to fix that. Sorry. To counter Iran's growing military relationship with Russia. And interestingly, CIA Director William Burns, he made an unannounced visit to Israel last week on Thursday to discuss Iran, among other issues, right before this attack. The U.S. wants to disrupt Iranian military supplies to Russia, although Iran insists that it hasn't provided drones to Moscow since the invasion of Ukraine. But at this point, it's not clear if the drone attack was related to the war in Ukraine. But Podolyak, the advisor to Zelensky, he made a point to comment on the incident. He wrote on Twitter, quote, "Explosive night in Iran. Ukraine did try to warn you," end quote. And he previously called for the liquidation of Iranian military facilities that produce weapons. So, Yeah, this is where we're at. Again, there's a history of attacks like this. I'm not saying that makes it any less, of an act of aggression against Iran. In any other world, if an Iranian drone, attacked the U.S. or something, it would be huge, a huge deal. So we'll see how Iran responds, and we'll see. We might see more leaks to the media saying, "Oh yeah, the CIA was involved." Right now, we don't know; it's not clear. They usually try to distance themselves from these things and make it act like it's all Israel acting on its own behalf. But here, again, they're hinting that at U.S. involvement, and it's just another example of how this situation with Iran, even though all the focus is on Ukraine. This could really pop off at any time between Israel and Iran. There's a lot more things going on with Israel at the moment, but it seems like they're still making a point to go after Iran. I just want to take this moment to mention that our fundraiser is finished. I just wanted to thank everybody for the support. Anybody that chipped in, we really appreciate it. It's how we get by. We exceeded our goal. So it went really well. It's pretty encouraging because last time it really took a while. This was quick. So we're really happy. Again, special thank you to Roger Waters for putting up 20 grand, which is just huge to us. And again, this money's not wasted, goes directly to paying the staff, keeping the website going. All right, I got to keep going here because we still have a lot of news to get through. So this next one, this is from Mondo Weiss, and this is just kind of a summary of all the violence that we've seen in the West Bank, in Israel, in East Jerusalem, and Gaza over the past few days. So in the last show, I went over the Jenin raid where 9 Palestinians were killed. I believe the death toll is up to 10 now. But after that, there was a shooting in East Jerusalem carried out by a Palestinian that targeted Israeli settlers. It killed 7 people. And then in response to that shooting, there's just been tons of violence, settler attacks on Palestinians. Also, there was bombing in Gaza. I mean, it's just things have exploded, and I think that they're going to get a lot worse, much worse. I'm predicting here. So this is from Mondo Weiss again. They did a good summary of everything. The past 72 hours have been some of the deadliest recorded in the occupied Palestinian West Bank and East Jerusalem in years. Since Thursday, January 26th, 14 Palestinians have been killed, and dozens of others have been wounded by Israeli forces and settlers in the occupied territory, 10 of whom were killed in Jenin during a deadly army raid on the Jenin refugee camp. During the same period, 6 Israeli settlers and 1 Ukrainian woman were killed, and several others were injured in 2 shooting operations in Jerusalem. The situation on the ground has continued to develop rapidly, with rockets fired out of Gaza in response to the massacre in Jenin, and a number of Israeli airstrikes carried out on the besieged strip. Several other shooting operations have been carried out by Palestinian armed resistance groups in the West Bank, while Palestinians across the West Bank and Jerusalem have taken to the streets in protest. Meanwhile, as Israeli forces stepped up arrests and raids, Israeli settlers waged attacks on Palestinians and their property across the West Bank, with 144 incidents of settler violence recorded in a single night on Saturday. So I can't go through everything, but a breakdown of events. I just want to mention the shooting, a young Palestinian man. He was 21 years old. He went into an Israeli settlement, and he shot several people in the area, killing 7 people. So in response to that, this new Israeli government is calling for promising more collective punishment. And among the measures that the Netanyahu government is discussing, proposals for looser gun laws so Israeli citizens can get more guns, revoking the social security benefits of the Palestinians, of the families of Palestinian attackers from East Jerusalem, proposal of a law to deport the families of Palestinian attackers, sealing the family homes of Palestinian attackers ahead of demolition, arresting the family and friends of Palestinian attackers, steps to strengthen Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and deploying more military troops in the West Bank. So again, Ben-Gvir, the Israeli minister, he said that he is going to push for the death penalty against Palestinians. So that's the situation. Again, it's just not good. But at the same time, it does appear Israel is still doing other operations outside the country. There were reports of that airstrikes hit trucks, a convoy of trucks on the Syria-Iraq border. So airstrikes targeting a convoy of trucks launched by unidentified aircraft were reported on the Syria-Iraq border on Sunday. According to the Times of Israel, Syria's Sham FM radio station and other local media reports said that 6 refrigerator trucks were hit. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also reported that 6 refrigerator trucks were targeted and said they were hit in eastern Syria after crossing the border. The aircraft was unidentified, but Israel is suspected as it has launched similar attacks in the past. In November, airstrikes hit a convoy of trucks entering Syria from Iraq, reportedly killing 10 people. And Israel's former army chief, Aviv Kochabi, he later said that Israel was responsible for the attack, so he took credit for that. And he just stepped down as the head of the IDF. He claimed a truck in the convoy that was hit in November was carrying weapons from Iran to Lebanon, while Syrian media reports said it was carrying fuel. So that's how they justify the strikes. They're saying the convoys are taking weapons to Hezbollah. Israel frequently launches airstrikes in Syria, but they rarely acknowledge individual strikes. So where we're at with this, again, these are just unconfirmed reports, but there are a lot of them that there were airstrikes. We don't know for sure if it was Israel. They're suspected. Also, I mean, the U.S. has launched a lot of airstrikes in this region of Syria against, the Iraqi Shia militias. So it's possible it was the U.S., but I think the main suspect right now is Israel. But again, we don't know. Nothing's confirmed here. Okay, so the next one. An Air Force general predicts war with China in 2025. So a 4-star U.S. Air Force general thinks that a war between the U.S. and China is only 2 years away, and he has ordered his forces to start preparing for the conflict. In a memo obtained by NBC News, General Mike Minihan, the head of the Air Mobility Command, said a war with China. Well, he said of a war with China, quote, "I hope I am wrong. My gut tells me we will fight in 2025." End quote. So Air Mobility Command is a major command of the U.S. Air Force and is responsible for transportation and refueling. Nearly 50,000 airmen are members of this command, and they oversee about 430 aircraft. So Rep. Michael McCall, he's a Republican from Texas. He's the new chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He believes that this prediction is right. He said he hopes that this general is wrong, but I think he's right. Although later on Sunday, Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, he's the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. He pushed back on the prediction and said that it was highly unlikely that the U.S. and China would be at war in 2025. It's only 2 years from now. And he said generals should be very cautious about saying things like this. And for once, I hope Adam Smith is right here. And, that it is highly unlikely that this war is going to break out. So in his memo, Minihan claimed that because the U.S. and Taiwan are both holding presidential elections in 2024, they will be distracted, giving China the opportunity to move on Taiwan. And for their part, China has recently reiterated that it seeks peaceful reunification. That is its long-term goal. Very long-term. China thinks in terms of dynasties. I believe they said they want to do it by 2049, which is pretty far from now. But they won't rule out the use of force. China has an interest in not invading Taiwan due to its robust trade relationship with the island and the sheer difficulty of launching such a large-scale amphibious invasion. So always important to note that. And I'm not in the business of predicting things. When it comes to this, I have no idea when a war could really break out. It's really hard to say. China has a lot of interest in not attacking, but at the same time, China has, as I'm always covering, stepped up its military activity around Taiwan due to increasing U.S. support for the island. And despite Beijing's warnings, the U.S. continues to boost ties with Taiwan, including by providing unprecedented military aid. And at some point, this support could become intolerable for China. And Beijing could take action, short of an invasion, such as a blockade, maybe trying to close down the Taiwan Strait, or by attacking the small islands that Taiwan controls off mainland China's coast. Again, this is just speculation of things they could do. Who knows really what's going to happen here? But a war between the U.S. and China could also be sparked in the South China Sea, where the U.S. has increased its military activity in recent years. U.S. and Chinese warplanes and warships occasionally have close encounters in the area, and with U.S.-China relations at such a low point, an accident could really spiral into a wider conflict. So this general, he told the officers that he commands to report all major efforts they take to prepare for war with China by February 28th. And he also called for his personnel to get their affairs in order as they prepare for war. He said that they should consider their personal affairs, legal things that they need to get prepared for if they have to be shipped off to a war. So, the Pentagon said this doesn't reflect their view, but at the same time, you see U.S. military officials all the time saying they're preparing for war with China. And the Pentagon itself has said China is the main, so-called threat facing the U.S. So it's definitely a little unsettling to see a 4-star general say something like that. All right, the next one. This is an article from the South China Morning Post just about how Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, is visiting South Korea and Japan, and they're going to be discussing China. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg trip to South Korea and Japan next week is expected to lay the groundwork for their Indo-Pacific security partnership to guard against a systemic challenge from China. So, I mean, that's a big message to China that the head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is going over there to discuss China. Again, it's this military buildup, this alliance building that the U.S. is leading and really pushing around China. And they're preparing for war, whether it's going to happen or not. That's what they are preparing for. All right, the next one. Erdogan says that Turkey could approve Finland's NATO bid without Sweden. So Erdogan said this Sunday, and this is the first time he suggested that Turkey could give the okay to Finland without Sweden. He said, quote, "If necessary, we can give a different response concerning Finland. Sweden will be shocked when we give a different response for Finland," end quote. So, and really the whole thing is that, Turkey initially opposed their NATO memberships over their alleged ties to the PKK, alleged support for that Kurdish militant group that Turkey, the EU, and the US consider a terrorist organization. But the issue is more so with Sweden. They have more of a Kurdish population, and Turkey's been making more demands of Sweden in general. They want them to extradite, everybody that they demand. Sweden's top court has blocked some extraditions. And Turkey recently suspended NATO talks with Sweden and Finland over a Quran burning protest that was held outside the Turkish embassy in Sweden. And after that, Erdogan said Sweden should not expect their support for a NATO membership. So throughout the application process, Sweden and Finland have said that their memberships are linked and that one would not join the alliance without the other. However, Finland's foreign minister did suggest last week that they would consider changing the policy, although he kind of walked back those comments, but it was significant. It was the first time we saw that being said by an official in either country. And it's really Finland joining NATO that is going to be the big tension raiser with Russia, because they share an over 800-mile border with Russia. And Finnish officials have said that they would not rule out hosting nuclear weapons under NATO's nuclear sharing program. That would really, I can't imagine that happening. That would just be so insane. But the country's president, Finland's president, did say that there's no indication they would be asked to host nuclear weapons. And it would be a long time from now. Let's say Finland joined tomorrow. The U.S. hasn't put nukes in any countries that joined NATO, post-Cold War. So they're not going to just jump to Finland. They would probably start with Poland. But still, it could happen way down the line. So the last one here, this is from Responsible Statecraft, Connor Eccles, and Switzerland is breaking with its policy of neutrality. A group of Swiss lawmakers has moved forward a proposal to allow countries to give Swiss-made weapons to Ukraine in a move that would soften Switzerland's centuries-old policy of neutrality toward foreign conflicts. And that policy, along with Sweden's, it kept these countries out of the world wars. It spared them destruction that most of Europe faced because of those wars. And now they are, abandoning that. But Switzerland still has a long way to go in this regard. Although they did join some sanctions against Russia. And because of that, Russia doesn't want to hold arms control talks in Geneva anymore. They want to do it in elsewhere. So, again, this is just the beginning of this potential policy, but it would be significant if Switzerland started sending weapons. But that's it for the news for today. That was a ton of stuff, and there was more. I didn't get to everything today. Another big thing that happened was the RAND Corporation, the Pentagon-funded think tank, put out this report about avoiding a long war in Ukraine. That's interesting. I got to read the whole thing if I'm going to write about it, so I didn't have time to do that today. So I'll get to that tomorrow. But go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Ted Snyder. The U.S. is sending tanks to Ukraine, but why? One from Caitlin Johnstone over at her Substack. The West is incentivizing Russia to hit back. And I think she's right. She quotes one of my articles in there, which is always cool. One from James Carden, U.S. Foreign Policy Establishment, proves that they lost the lessons of Vietnam. That's over at the U.S. American Committee for U.S.-Russia Accord. One from Andrew Iervolino, beware of the America First foreign policy phonies, over at Responsible Statecraft. And our spotlight is from Colonel Douglas McGregor over at the American Conservative. This time it's different. Neither we nor our allies are prepared to fight all-out war with Russia, regionally or globally. So his columns are always really good. Go check that out. That's it for me for today. I'll be back tomorrow with a lot more news. Again, just so much stuff happened over the weekend. But anyway, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.